First on, we have Graham Evans from S&P Global. I think my role here is to set the scene on what is effectively the largest end market for traction batteries, and I'll predominantly be focused on light passenger vehicles. We expect by 2030 now around 45% of the vehicles produced, light passenger vehicles produced, will be battery electric. So that's taken us from some 8.8 million vehicles that are fully battery electric in 2022 to a pretty huge 44 million by 2030 globally. So annual vehicle production globally. So what does this mandate in terms of battery requirements? Well, going from somewhere around 0.5 terawatt required in 2022 up to 3.4 terawatt hours by 2030. So it's a huge shift in terms of demand. And of course, that comes from the increased number of EVs, but what it also comes from is an increase in average battery capacity. So range, as we know, is a critical challenge for electric vehicles at the moment, and in particular, real-world range. And an increase in average battery capacity, average battery size, is going to help solve some of those challenges. And of course, we don't necessarily have more space in the electric vehicle to install more batteries, but we expect improvements in cell energy density, concepts like cell to pack, where we can effectively cram more batteries into the given space that we have to achieve higher energy density, will drive this, circa 1/3 increase in the average battery capacity. A large number of markets now globally have introduced a mandate for zero emissions. Obviously, some of the smaller, more unique markets, we can talk about Norway. Most people are familiar with the story of Norway. And last year, I was in Oslo and I spoke to a member of the Norwegian EV Association. He told me that the Porsche Taycan is now outselling diesel light passenger vehicles in Norway combined in a given month. That tells you a lot about the wealth of consumers in Norway, but it also tells you a lot about how people are concerned about the long-term viability of a diesel-powered vehicle. But of course, perhaps more interesting is the comments in the blue on the right side there around some of these major markets that are introducing step-by-step legislation to ensure that the average CO2 emissions of the fleet in that country are being reduced at a certain pace. And of course, these are major automotive markets: China, Europe, North America. So this is really driving the pace of change in the industry. But in terms of overall demand, the extent of the increase in demand for things like cathode material, anode material, in particular lithium and nickel, and perhaps to a lesser degree cobalt. This is metric tons. That sort of sixfold demand for CAM. Similar for AM, and obviously the demand for lithium and nickel is huge, because the vast majority of these batteries are going to require at least some of both of those. So this is the kind of the challenge that we face in terms of getting these raw materials out of the ground and having them in a battery grade form and available to the OEMs in order or available to the suppliers to produce the batteries to then go into the vehicles. If we just think about it purely from a cathode and an anode perspective, we see this increase in capacity out to this is 2028 now. We think that there is enough capacity from an anode and cathode perspective globally, but at the same time, what is coming with legislative measures is to if you like, reassess this or redistribute this balance. So China is well geared up in order to support this ramp up in electric vehicles, and the demand for the constituent raw materials and the anode and cathode like the processing to produce the anode and cathode. We see there a deficit in a region like North America, and of course that's the reason why there is this real push with the measures like the IRA, to the Inflation Reduction Act, in order to bring more local capacity into markets like this to support the high demand.
There are studies that suggest, some really massive numbers in terms of demand for critical raw materials, and I think, just wrapping your head around these numbers, it's staggering. This will have, some massive implications for us, and whether we're able to achieve, that as well is an open question. Taking that back to the heavy-duty sector as well, even though as a sector, we account for only 4 to 11% of the road fleets, depending on what country you are. The demand for critical raw materials is estimated to be over 60% in future. And that's mainly because, unlike the passenger car segment, we're looking at some really massive, batteries. I think it would have been great to actually get a truck, outside so people could have a look, at the scale of that, because some things have to be seen to be believed, really. But there are some other aspects that we need to be aware of and we need to manage really effectively. From an investment perspective, there's a growing focus on environmental, social, and governance issues. We're seeing lots of questions around the battery supply chain in that space as well. And so there's a lot of pressure on manufacturers as well as investors, to show that, they take into account all of these issues in their investment decisions.